Awesome. So again, let me introduce myself. My name is Chris Dion. I'm a product marketing manager here based out of Dallas, Fort Worth. It's great to see everybody joining us today. And with that, we'll go straight into the demo itself, right? So let me just switch over. Okay, in this session, we're going to be going over the authoring capabilities that Katalon Studio has to offer, help reduce the maintenance cost that goes into it via self-healing and other traditional methods. With those objects maintained properly, we will then be able to go over the reusing of these test assets through StudioAssist and through other methods as well. We'll then shift over to our API project so that we can then focus on an example to showcase, how to create API test cases, import them, as well as, focusing on parameterization, custom keywords, and listeners. And then we'll wrap this all up together into a regression test suite, which we then can focus on different execution of environments and test suite targeting. So if you are wanting to execute your test regression against multiple different web browsers or against multiple mobile devices, we'll be able to showcase that in this demonstration. But with that being said, let's switch over to Katalon Studio. Okay, so now that we're in Katalon Studios, I would like to point out that everything that you're going to be seeing in this demonstration will be showcased and available to you guys inside of our sample projects. To access those sample projects, you simply need to go into File, New Sample Project, and then here you'll start seeing all of the projects I'll be working on. So in this case, I'll be working on the Sample Web UI Shopping Cart project, the Android Mobile Test project, and also StudioAssist and the API test project. Those are all that we're going to be talking about. But again, you're more than welcome to look at all the others like WDB, iOS, etc. Okay, so we're going to first start off with the record and playback capabilities. That is for the web and mobile platform. For the web, you simply need to go here and select the red dot version. The green dot is simply a spy tool. For those who are unfamiliar, spy just means that we are going to be capturing objects and not creating steps off the way we interact with the application. So this is a really good tool to utilize after recording your base cases, and then you may want to add some other objects that may enhance or diverge test cases into those nuanced test cases that you are wanting to cover. So in this case, we're just going to click on the record web. Then we need to provide a URL that we're going to start our recording session under and select a browser of our choice for cross-browser support. So if you want to record in Chrome, you can then play back in any of the listed browsers you see here, as well as the ones that you don't see here, like Apple and Safari. So once we have that selected, we're going to go into the recording sessions. I'm going to click on this expand, and you'll see that the browser has opened up for us. Now, all we need to do is interact with the application as if we were doing a normal, manual test run. In this case, I'm just going to be logging in. Once I'm logged in, I will then go to the shop. And as you can see here, these test steps are actually being generated for us, and we can easily go inside here. Click on the next fine. Let's say, for instance, I just want to verify a given item. All I need to do is click on said item, and I can easily go into the drop-down menu shown here. And we can then scroll down to the V for verify. There's a number of options that we can actually start selecting from, but we are just simply checking to see if the if there's a specific element that we are wanting to focus on. Let's say verify element text. And then we want to then make sure that verify element text is equal to the value that we see here. In this case, flying ninja. We click OK. And then we can continue doing on this test scripts, add more verification steps, and then we can save our test script. Once we save our test scripts, we can then, click the save button. Once we click on the save button, it will bring up a object repository to work with, right? So the object repository is where we save all of our objects, like the input, username, text fields, buttons, and text items that we interacted with in our recording sessions, and we are putting them in specific folders. We do create folders automatically based off the page of the application. So in this case, we have the My Account on the Katalon Shop folder, and we have the username, password, and login button stored in it. If this is all good for our organization needs, we can easily just click OK. And then now we just simply need to name this new test case. Let's just simply call it logging in and check for ninjas. Right? Doesn't obviously need to be named that, but for the sake of the test case, we'll just go for that. Okay, we have our test case. We can easily start interacting with these steps, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. Now, for mobile testing, what you'll need to do is that you'll first need to connect devices to your actual computer. This can be done through USB for physical devices, or in my case, I am running Android Studio in the background, and I have a mobile device running in the background. Once that is all set up, you can easily just go in here. You'll see the device, in this case, it's an Android device, highlighted or activated, I should say. And then it will Katalon Studio will automatically pull it in, and we can then choose from an application file, again, APK for Android in this case, and we're going to browse for it. We'll select the APK here, click open, and then we can start a recording session from this point. Okay, so this is going to take a few seconds, but once this is done, we'll start our recording session. So I'll talk to you guys in a few seconds. With the application installed, we can now interact with the mobile recorder. The mobile recorder is broken up into 3 sections. First, on the far left, we have our recorded actions. Then on the far right, we have our device view and our all object view in the middle. Lastly, we have our available actions. So the way that we create test steps is interact with either the device view through the UI or through the all object view, which is scraping all the UI objects on the screen at that moment and showing you the hierarchy shown here. In this case, we'll interact with the application. In this case, I'm clicking on the preference button. We can see it being highlighted in blinking green in the device view, and we can see it being highlighted in blue in the all object view. Now we just simply give it an available action, things like tap, tap and hold, swipe, etc. In this case, we're simply going to tap into the next menu. And then we can go into the all object view, and let's go click here in the default values. Again, you see it being highlighted in the all object, and you see it blinking in the device view. And we just simply give it another action, in this case tap. There are many different UI elements that we support, things that would be mobile specific, like switches. We can easily start interacting with that and tapping it. We can then go into, say, typing things out. Let's say edit text preferences. Tapping that will bring up a text screen. And if we wanted to type something into a given area, we simply need to click on the object. In this case, we're going to say set text, enter your favorite animal, which is going to be a dog. That will then be executed and put onto the screen. If we want to get information from the application, we simply just need to click on an object and say get text. We say, okay, that's the text that we're going to get. Let me apply the action. Now we have that information that we can then use for parameterization or some other verification that we want to incorporate. Adding verification steps is very easy as well. Again, we can simply just go into the add step or any individual step we want to, and we can go into the drop-down menu and scroll through all of the ones that we see here. In this case, we can go down to the verifications. Again, much like we saw before, we can do verify element property tags, verify element text, and we can make sure that a given element is of this type, where it says enter your favorite animal. In this case, we can easily just change this get text into the verify one, like so. And we'll just move this over a little bit. And we can easily just type in what we want. So enter your favorite animal. And then once we run this test case, it'll actually check to see if, in fact, this object reads that keyword. And that's pretty much it for mobile and web recording. Again, really straightforward. Just interact with the application and understand that you are going to be able to change and maintain these objects and also test scripts later down the line, also later down this demonstration. Again, we can save the script, we'll give it a name, etc., and you'll start seeing those scripts being saved in the left section over here. Now, we didn't talk about this section, but now we will, given the fact that we have test cases, and those test cases have objects, right? So all of the interactions that we've had so far, all the test scripts are shown here in our manual perspective. Here we can start seeing, the item actions like click, navigate, open browsers, verify element text, etc. The objects in question for those steps, the input if there is any. Like if we are inputting in some username or password, we can enter that information here. Should be noted for those who are curious about encryption, anytime we capture a password object, it will be set to the set encrypted text so that that information can be private as much as possible. We can change these perspective into a script form. We'll go into this a little bit later down the lines when we start talking about StudioAssist. But understand that both your developers and your technical users and your manual users will be able to create test cases and not have to recapture, rediscover, remaintain all of different sets of objects to create a test case. Everyone's going to be working on the same object repositories, same object, same identification, and can be incorporated very easily across different skill sets. We can also go into these objects fairly easily by just going inside here and then open a given object, and we can start seeing how we capture this information, right? So we have 4 ways of identification, 5 technically, we have XPath, attributes, CSS, image, and smart locators. So you can set defaults based on whatever you are most comfortable and or what is your application's best identifier. For majority of them, I would say XPath is predominantly the major one that a lot of people are used to. However, for those more data-centric, unique identifiers that can be attached to certain UI elements, we can actually incorporate attributes simply by going into this next section. And we can look at the list of property names and values that we want to set for. So here we start seeing tags, classes, names, ID, etc. The condition that needs to be absolute equals to this value. And we can then select which object identifier we want to incorporate into identifying through the attribute method. Okay. And we also have things like Smart Locator, which has just recently been added, which we'll go into a little bit later down the lines in another video. Now, let's just say, for instance, I wanted to change this, but I don't know how to change the XPath. We do just capture not just one, but we capture as many as we possibly can to a given object. This is going to come in handy because we're going to incorporate something called self-healing, the self-healing capabilities in Katalon Studios. So what that means is that we're going to go inside of here, and let's say I want to copy this, and just copy and paste it. And now I'm not identifying based on attributes, I'm identifying it based on relative position in the actual application, right? We can then start testing to see this if this works by going back into our test case. So in this case, I'm actually going to cause a problem by deleting the locator. The selected locator is the main way we identify a given object. So without one, it's going to fail. But with self-healing, what's going to happen is that when we execute this test case, we'll see here, that is actually going to run the test case, find the problem, and then triage that problem during execution. This is, again, something that is going to help you greatly when it comes to those actual errors that come in that prevents regressions from continuing on. And in fact, we can actually start, ensuring that these test cases run as much as possible and as often as possible. So we're going to be launching the browser right here. Once it's finished, we'll then be able to continue on with our test case. So I will cut this video a little bit short so that we can actually go to the next part of this. So I'll see you guys in a few seconds. So now that our test is finished, we can now go into our test results. We can go into Katalon Studios. We can see that the actual test case did pass. It did have a problem that we caused, right? Which is the misidentification of an object. So inside here, we can go into this test. We can see that we were unable to find an element based on the XPath of nothing. So of course it failed. And then we can see that self-healing insight was actually utilized and then was able to find a working locator and continue on the test case as normal. We can also verify that being the case, given the fact that we were able to utilize the verify element text on that given object to check to see if there was ninjas. So here, all we need to do as a user is that we get these results. We go into our self-healing insight. We'll see a list of objects, or in this case, just one, that is broken. And we can easily, see a preview of it. And once we verify if it works or not, we can simply click on the Approve button. What this does is that it updates that object inside our object repository so that now the actual test case won't have this problem and will now work with that new and improved locator to continue on the test case as normal. This again greatly reduces our test cases, especially when you consider the fact that we are not just applying this to one test case, but every single test case that is utilizing this one object. Again, the benefit of centralizing all your objects in your test into a central repositories, but also making sure that all your developers, manual testers, and everyone who is going to contribute to testing will be able to incorporate that same object and update it in the same fashion. There, of course, is other ways that we can manually update this. This is done by, going inside of here, finding a different locator. I'll just move this down a little bit. Just a little bit. So we can actually just, go inside here, type it in, and all that sorts. But again, we don't need to, because if I were to close this and open up the object again, it will be automatically updated. But let's say it wasn't. Right? We can easily go inside the attributes, run the attributes side of things, go into the CSS images and smart locators, and utilize those as well if needed. Okay, and this goes for all objects, right? For all test cases, whether that would be through mobile or web, they are all going to be maintained in the same fashion. So with that being said, we can now go into StudioAssist, right? How do we reutilize these objects? How do we actually incorporate them into a given test case? So I'm going to open up a new sample project. Go over here, go into our StudioAssist, and we'll just call this StudioAssist for the sake of time. Hit enter. And once it loads up, we'll go from there. See you in a few seconds. Okay, so we have our StudioAssist and object repository example ready to show you. In this case, we are going to be working off of our current healthcare application. This is what the application will look like. So we have a login page. Once you log in, you'll be brought into the make appointment. Once you make appointments, you can then put in some information that you'll need for your healthcare providers, etc. So we have these already saved inside of our object repository, which is in the left side here, and we have each of these folders based on the web page that we're actually interacting with. For us to create a test case from scratch without going into a record and playback, all we need to do is click on the add button. We can then give things like click, and we can click on the make appointment button, drag and drop it inside here, and then from there it will bring us to the login page. So right now we'll be in the login page and we want to set text. So the first one will be a set text for the username. And then we can do another set text for encryption. Okay. And we'll put that for the password. So username, We can easily just put the value in here, which is John Doe. And then for the password, we'll just copy and paste it from here for the demonstration. For the password, we'll go inside here, and when we go into the value section, we instantly are prompted with the raw text encryption, right? This way we can actually just put in what the information is and have the assurance that it will be encrypted and only be decrypted on execution. So we'll insert it, click OK. We can continue doing this for each and every single test step if we wanted to. However, what could be more beneficial for other people to utilize, maybe coming from a manual tester or coming from more of a BDD background, we can actually start incorporating what is called StudioAssist. Now, we do have an example of what that looks like. So let's go into our test cases. Let's go into generate code. And let's go into the first basic script. Now, here we start seeing that we don't have a manual test view. However, if we were to switch to the script view, we have something notable in coding called comments. And this is what it looks like. So we have something where it's a forward slash or backslash star, and we end it with a star backslash. This is because we are going to be making instructions for Katalon to interpret and then turn into test steps. So here we start saying that inside that comment, we are going to write a Katalon Studio test case to perform the following steps. 1, open a browser, go to this URL. 2, click on the Make Appointment button with the ID of a given object in our object repository, fill in the username, fill in the password, etc. These are all things that we can easily start interpreting and turning into actionable steps. So to do that, we need to first set up Katalon Studio with StudioAssist, which requires a ChatGPT secret key. We do have a way of installing that and have a tutorial on how to install StudioAssist, or set it up, I should say. But once you have it installed, all you really need to do is just right-click a piece of highlighted text. In this case, make sure it's a comment. And then you need to go to StudioAssist and go into Generate Code. It will take a few seconds, but once it's finished, you will then have a step-by-step instruction of what is actually going on with your test case. So each of these comments that we start seeing here, the open browser to a specific URL, is now seeing the exact action or the exact step for that test case. And if you come from a non-technical background where coding is not something that you're used to seeing, you can easily start learning that by looking at the given instruction and then the following step in the test case shown here. Now, this is really great for people who are wanting to focus on, creating test cases very seamlessly by, utilizing natural language. Now, there's a couple things to be aware of, right? First off is that you need objects to exist inside of your object repository. And the reason why is because when we click on the Make Appointment button, we want to make sure we're clicking on the Make Appointment button and we're pointing to an object. In this case, a button with the ID of button_make appointment. Now, this is pointing to your object repository folder. So if we look inside here, this is page_Kura homepage / button make appointment. We see page_Kura appointment. And then in that folder, we see the button_book appointment. Right? These are assets that we're pointing to inside of our repositories. And there's multiple ways of referencing them. You don't have to reference them exactly by file location. You can just reference them by the actual object's name if it's unique, right? So if you have like 13 buttons and they're all button 1, then obviously Katalon Studio is going to have a hard time interpreting that natural language and choosing the right one, right? There's ways of going about it and addressing that. But other than that, you're still going to input some simple interactions, like you can point to variables. You can simply say, instead of the variable itself, you can just hard code that value in. You can start focusing on how exactly it's going to verify specific information. Like in this case, we're just going to verify if the appointment div is actually on the page at that time. If it is, great. And this is obviously being evolved further with future updates within Katalon Studio's efforts of incorporating AI both from an end-to-end perspective as well as focusing on authoring capabilities. Now, StudioAssist is great for creating test cases, but what it's really going to help for the developers and for the more technical individuals is documentation. So let's go into our test cases, and let's go into an example for this. So we have an explain basic script, right? We have some steps shown here, but let's say, for instance, I'm someone from the dev team created this test script and they didn't document it. It's not normal, but best practices can often have some slip-ups every once in a while. And I, let's say, is a manual user who don't know how to read any code whatsoever. What I can easily do is I can just, in general, generate a explanation of what's going on with this test script simply by, again, highlighting it, going to StudioAssist, and selecting the generate explanation. And as you can see here in the bottom section, we now have a commented section where it's showing us step-by-step what is going on. The first line of the action is going to open the browser and navigate to the specified site URL. It is then going to click on the Make Appointment button. It's going to set the username and password, right? And it's going to click on the Login button. This allows me as a manual tester to understand what is exactly going on and allows the collaborations between your traditional manual testing QA team to work with the more technical dev team, which is allowing us to achieve that shift left movement. Now, this is all going to be available for you with a license of Katalon Studio. Just know that this is all going to improve the collaboration as well as your documentation and authoring capabilities. From here, right, we have covered the test creation capabilities of UI, right, the web, the mobile, the maintenance of these objects, creating these test cases after having objects already existing through StudioAssist, and also through the general traditional method of drag and dropping objects into test steps. The next section we'll be talking about the API capabilities. So we'll be focusing on how to import them, how to create them, how to utilize that. And in that process, we'll start talking about listeners and as well as parameterization. So let me bring up the API and I'll talk to you guys in a few seconds. Okay, so we have our StudioAssist and object repository example ready to show you. In this case, we are going to be working off of our current healthcare application. This is what the application would look like. So we have a login page. Once you log in, you'll be brought into the Make Appointment. Once you make appointments, you can then put in some information that you'll need for your healthcare providers, etc. So we have these already saved inside of our object repository, which is in the left side here, and we have each of these folders based on the web page that we're actually interacting with. For us to create a test case from scratch without going into a record and playback, all we need to do is click on the Add button. We can then give things like click, and we can click on the Make Appointment button, drag and drop it inside here, and then from there, it will bring us to the login page. So right now, we'll be in the login page, and we want to set text. So the first one will be a set text for the username. And then we can do another set text for encryption. Okay, and we'll put that for the password. So username, we can easily just put the value in here, which is John Doe. And then for the password, we'll just copy and paste it from here for the demonstration. For the password, we'll go inside here. And when we go into the value section, we instantly are prompted with the raw text encryption, right? This way we can actually just put in what the information is and have the assurance that it will be encrypted and only be decrypted on execution. So we'll insert it, click OK. We can continue doing this for each and every single test step if we wanted to. However, what could be more beneficial for other people to utilize, maybe coming from a manual tester or coming from more of a BDD background, we can actually start incorporating what is called StudioAssist. Now, we do have an example of what that looks like. So let's go into our test cases. Let's go into generate code, and let's go into the first basic script. Now, here we start seeing that we don't have a manual test view. However, if we were to switch to the script view, we have something notable in coding called comments. And this is what it looks like. So we have something where it's a forward slash or backslash star, and we end it with a star backslash. This is because we are going to be making instructions for Katalon to interpret and then turn into test steps. So here we start saying that inside that comment, we are going to write a Katalon Studio test case to perform the following steps. 1, open a browser, go to this URL. 2, click on the Make Appointment button with the ID of a given object in our object repository, fill in the username, fill in the password, etc. These are all things that we can easily start interpreting and turning into actionable steps. So to do that, we need to first set up Katalon Studio with StudioAssist, which requires a ChatGPT secret key. We do have a way of installing that and have a tutorial on how to install StudioAssist, or set it up, I should say. But once you have it installed, all you really need to do is just right-click a piece of highlighted text. In this case, make sure it's a comment. And then you need to go to StudioAssist and go into Generate Code. It'll take a few seconds, but once it's finished, you will then have a step-by-step instruction of what is actually going on with your test case. So each of these comments that we start seeing here, the open browser to a specific URL, is now seeing the exact action or the exact step for that test case. And if you come from a non-technical background where coding is not something that you're used to seeing, you can easily start learning that by looking at the given instruction and then the following step in the test case shown here. Now, this is really great for people who are wanting to focus on, creating test cases very seamlessly by, utilizing natural language. Now, there's a couple things to be aware of, right? First off is that you need objects to exist inside of your object repository. And the reason why is because when we click on the Make Appointment button, we want to make sure we're clicking on the Make Appointment button and we're pointing to an object. In this case, a button with the ID of button_make appointment. Now, this is pointing to your object repository folder. So if we look inside here, this is page_Kura homepage / button make appointment. We see page_Kura appointment. And then in that folder, we see the button_book appointment. Right? These are assets that we're pointing to inside of our repositories. And there's multiple ways of referencing them. You don't have to reference them exactly by file location. You can just reference them by the actual object's name if it's unique, right? So if you have like 13 buttons and they're all button 1, then obviously Katalon Studio is going to have a hard time interpreting that natural language and choosing the right one, right? There's ways of going about it and addressing that. But other than that, you're still going to input some simple interactions, like you can point to variables. You can simply say, instead of the variable itself, you can just hard code that value in. You can start focusing on how exactly it's going to verify specific information. Like in this case, we're just going to verify if the appointment div is actually on the page at that time. And if it is, great. And this is obviously being evolved further with future updates within Katalon Studio's efforts of incorporating AI both from an end-to-end perspective as well as focusing on authoring capabilities. Now, StudioAssist is great for creating test cases, but what it's really going to help for the developers and for the more technical individuals is documentation. So let's go into our test cases and let's go into an example for this. So we have an explain basic script, right? We have some steps shown here. But let's say, for instance, I'm someone from the dev team created this test script and they didn't document it. It's not normal, but best practices can often have some slip ups every once in a while. And I, let's say, is a manual user who don't know how to read any code whatsoever. What I can easily do is I can just, in general, generate a explanation of what's going on with this test script simply by, again, highlighting it, going to StudioAssist, and selecting the generate explanation. And as you can see here in the bottom section, we now have a commented section where it's showing us step by step what is going on. The first line of the action is going to open the browser and navigate to the specified site URL. It is then going to click on the Make Appointment button. It's going to set the username and password, right? And it's going to click on the Login button. This allows me as a manual tester to understand what is exactly going on and allows the collaborations between your traditional manual testing QA team to work with the more technical dev team, which is allowing us to achieve that shift left movement. Now, this is all going to be available for you with a license of Katalon Studio. Just know that this is all going to improve the collaboration as well as your documentation and authoring capabilities. From here, right, we have covered the test creation capabilities of UI, right, the web, the mobile, the maintenance of these objects, creating these test cases after having objects already existing through StudioAssist, and also through the general traditional method of drag and dropping objects into TestOps. The next section we'll be talking about the API capabilities. So we'll be focusing on how to import them, how to create them, how to utilize that. And in that process, we'll start talking about listeners and as well as parameterization. So let me bring up the API and I'll talk to you guys in a few seconds. A quick side note before we continue on to our demonstration is allowing you guys to be aware of our API AI test generation capabilities that will be shortly shown to you guys and be available for users of Katalon Studios in the very near future after this recording. Now, exactly why are we introducing AI into the API test generation? It's because we recognize the fact that there is a bottleneck in the API test generation process, which is there's a lot of chaining of requests, a lot of verification steps, and a lot of, in general, repetition and manually intensive work that needs to go into fully testing out the backend components and backend services of a given application. Now, for people who are inexperienced with testers, say manual testing, that is also now given the responsibility of testing out the API libraries and developing it out, this leads to frustration for them. And in general, can lead to a poor backend quality, which leads to an overall bad UI and user experience for a lot of customers. Now, how exactly is Katalon improving this? We're doing this by enabling users to generate API test cases automatically through the usage of OpenAPI and Swagger specs. This leads to a higher efficiency in API test generation and also broadens the testing scope a given team can handle regardless of their actual experience level with API testing. This in tandem with our true test capabilities, which we'll talk about in another call, most likely the next one that we have after this one, will allow users to start focusing on the new ones and the more unique test cases rather than focusing on setting a baseline for their API backend testing. Now, with that being said, let's actually go into Katalon Studios and continue the API portion. Now that we talked about API's AI capability, we can now start going into regression test suites, listeners, controllers, etc. So first things first is custom keywords, right? So in our test case here, let's just exit out of some of these. Go back to our test case where we create a new user and go into the manual script. Right, we see this sample common create new user. This is a custom keyword, which is essentially a collection of actions that are being combined into a single step. We can make this into a custom keyword or into a reference to an individual test case, right? And we can start incorporating that in the same fashion. To create a custom keyword, all we need to do is that we need to go into keywords, create new, obviously. We have one already made. And this is where we can start utilizing things like keywords. In this case, we make a keyword called create new user that will first capture or send the response and capture the response, right? And then we can then return with the JSON response.id, right? You can start incorporating this in many different fashions. Again, it is writing code, so the sky is the limit to what you can incorporate into a custom keyword. So from here, we'll just simply reference them by name by going into our test case again. And we can simply go into add, go into the drop-down menu, and we can select the custom keyword. Inside the custom keyword section, we can then do the drop-down menu, and we can see all the custom keywords that we've added. Here, you'll start seeing things like the Excel. This is a extension library that you can download. But the ones that we're focusing on are the last two, which is the sample.common.createNewUser and sample.common.findUserById. Okay. The next thing up is listeners. Listeners are ways for us to tear down and construct the environment. So before any execution takes place, let's set up the environment. And then after the execution has taken place, let's tear down the environment or do some post-processing after execution, right? These are all things that we can start incorporating as listeners. And again, we can do this by utilizing some keywords like at before test suite, at after test suites, etc. Lastly, let's start talking about test suites, right? So test suites are very simple, right? There are a number to incorporate. In this case, we're going to create a new one. And so we have test suites, test suite collections, and then dynamic test suites. We won't go into dynamic test suites right now, but for test suites, let me accidentally click on that. For test suites, we are simply making a collection of test cases, and we will sequentially execute them from the first test case all the way down to the last one, right? Test suite collections, it's when we start talking about multiple test suites being executed at the same time, or again in sequential order. So if we go into a test suite, just call this new. Right, we can add test cases that we've already created. There we go. And then we have one that already exists. So we can then start saying things like, give it a description. If we wanted to, we can start seeing a history of our test cases, or test suites, I should say. And we can actually start seeing, flakiness percentage, latest runs, average duration, etc. Here is where we start talking about global data bindings. So in the top section right here, we can actually start doing the same thing that we did parameterization, except in this case, it's going to save the parameterization across multiple test cases. So we can easily select one, add our list of users, and just like what we did before, we associate that list of users to the type. Right? So we'll go for our data column, and then that data column is going to be the list of users. And then that list of users will have the values coming from the age column. And there we go. This is going to allow us to do data-driven testing and have them organized in a regression test suite. Now, if we were to create a test suite collection, we'll call this new collection. Instead of us adding test suites, we add test cases, we add test suites instead. This is done by simply clicking on the OK. Now we have our test suites, and we have runs with web services and profiles. Again, profiles can be easily modified by simply just referencing them and selecting a different one. So if you're targeting different environments, different buildings, you can easily start switching between them. Since this is an API project, this is only going to be showing API. However, if we are going to incorporate them, we can easily incorporate them into an existing project. Let's go back to the shopping cart one. We'll click OK. And it will bring it up here in 1 second. Let's just save all these changes. So inside here, we have our test suites. We have, multiple different test cases to work with. Let's open up this one. Here's our test suite collection. And instead of seeing web services, we now have the option of selecting different web browsers to choose from. So let's say I want to run this regression in Chrome. Another time I want to run the same regression, but in Firefox, Safari, Edge, etc. If I was to do mobile testing, I can easily just select this for Android. Let's just click down on Android. And then if I were to run configurations, I will then see the loaded devices that we saw previously selected from here. It should be noted that if you are going to be using real or simulated local devices, this is the way that it's going to be, and you want to make sure that those devices are available when the execution takes place. Else, you will want to incorporate something of a mobile lab, which is what we offer through our TestCloud solution. But once we click OK, then our configurations are saved, and now this test suite regression will run its mobile test cases on an Android, targeting this specific emulator, utilizing this profile. These configurations can be saved and will be saved to a repository. That repository will be utilized in the next demonstration, which is going to be talking about the execution, the actual scheduling out of your test suites, and then focusing on the results that we get back inside of TestOps. But that is a conversation for another day. That is everything inside of Katalon Studio in regards to authoring. Again, there are some important things to rehash, right? Is that we have AI and smart features to help assist you guys in alleviating the creation and maintenance costs that goes into these test cases. That is with the usage of StudioAssist, with self-healing, with API, AI, and we are wanting to also implore you in looking into our future feature, which is called going into true tests, which is going to create these test cases based off of web traffic on your application, which again, great way for us to start creating a base layer of test suites, regression test suites, without having to focus on actually creating that. And it will be created based off of real traffic rather than the internal interpretation of what the real users are doing on a day-to-day basis.
All right. So that was our video demonstration. Couple of things to point out, and it looks like chat did make a couple comments on it. Yeah, there seems to be a repeated part of that. I apologize on that part. Other than that, it seems like we have a few comments. Let's see what we got here. And let's go through questions. Again, if you have any questions, or if you are wanting to address more of a more technical question, I see a few of them kind of addressing some of those. We can easily kind of address those with our solution engineers, who will be able to go through your personalized hurdle that you're trying to address, and we can start utilizing Katalon in that regards. But for right now, we'll answer as many as we possibly can with the time we have left. Okay, so can StudioAssist be connected to an internal version of ChatGPT? No, it will need to be connected to the online version. You'll need to create a secret key, and that secret key will be tied to your account. So you'll need to be making communications with OpenAI. To what depth or details can we optimize the test cases so that everything is 100% covered? This was made during StudioAssist. Okay. So the depth of details is going to be based around the Katalon steps, as well as if you will go into the examples for StudioAssist, which is again inside the file sample projects StudioAssist, you'll find out that we can actually do some advanced levels of test steps generations. To what extent 100% is, I can't really go into without having a full conversation with you. But just understand that this is definitely a solution that can cover that natural language usage. There was another question of that somebody pointed out that I kind of want to address pretty openly with it, and that is that Studio Assist, why, if we are referencing objects, why exactly are we utilizing Studio Assist? It's a great question, right? The first thing is that Studio Assist is not a replacement of the record and playback. It's an extension, right? Studio Assist is going to allow your BDD testing users a more natural way of creating the test cases rather than, say, focusing on a syntax where they can actually start creating these test cases continuously, right? So if they are wanting to, just contribute in the same fashion, but they don't want to learn how to create these test cases, via coding or through the record and playback, they can easily just type out the test steps that they want to see, and then those test steps will be generated. Um, Even without that, that BDD capability of creating the test cases, in my professional opinion, I believe the documentation is in itself a time saver. For those who have done coding in your day-to-day work, documentation is very important, especially for large teams. And when it comes to those complex test cases that many developers or code-centric scripters take time to create, those are going to be situations where documentation is going to be needed as much as possible. So what better way to save minutes that add up to hours by simply just selecting the section of code that you want to make, generating the documentation, and you're not going to have to wait on typing it yourself. These things add up, and again, gives the end users the time needed to actually focus on the test cases themselves and focus on more important work at hand. Let's look at some of these off topic. Okay, so someone brought up seems like more of a personal question on the difference between a click function and enhanced click function. Um, That is a question I do not know, but I know where to get the answer, and I can easily look that up real quick. Also, should be pointed out that inside of Catalan Studio, if you were to find the click and enhance click, right, you'll be able to hover your mouse over, and you will see the documentation for that. So if you're ever familiar with like man pages for coding standards, you can easily do that as well. In fact, if I have Catalan Studio up right now, I can easily show you what I mean by that. There we go. By the way, I use the single sign-on for Catalan Studio, so if you were wanting to see that as well. So let's just go inside of here. That's an API test. So we'll go inside of this one. We'll go to any one of these test cases, add a test step. So click. So here we have the click function, clicks on a given element, throws an exception. Here are some parameters. And if we were to go into enhance, click. So clicks on a given element using a various trial and error method. So the trial and error method, again, I personally have not utilized the enhance click, but the documentation can be expounded on inside of our documentation site. Let's see what we have here. Enhance click. Okay. So I'll post this into chat real quick. And I can easily show it to you. Answer. There you go. So that should be the URL link for that documentation, which go through all the description and even gives you an example of its usage. Okay. And let's go back to our presentation. There we go. All right. What else? I don't understand the link between API testing and test suites. Okay, so when you do API testing, and there was a comment about showcasing API tests, again, the demonstration is already close to 45 minutes to an hour. So API testing was kind of, cut short a little bit. We didn't go into the actual creation of these API test cases. We went into more of the importation method. But the API is going to be able to utilize keywords and listeners and test suites as a wrap-up discussion, right? So after the API test cases were made, we have our web, we have our mobile, we have our API test cases. How do we actually create a regression test suite? So that was just a natural transition into that point. Keywords and listeners are not just API centric. That is both API, web, mobile, right? They are simply teardowns and short ways of referencing a large section of code into a single step, right? So in a lot of cases, API testing, you can have multiple test steps that are repetitive, right? So you want to have that entire section of API chain requests and response. And you just want that into a single step. You can easily save that into a keyword and then put it into a given test case or test script that you want to have. This, again, is not limited to just API. It is also able to utilize for the other platforms that we support as well. How to install StudioAssist. Okay, so I believe I already touched on this, but I'll go into a little bit more details since it seems like this was made recently. To install StudioAssist, you don't need to do anything other than go to OpenAPI or OpenAI, get an account with them. In that account, you'll have access to create a API secret key. You'll copy that. You'll go inside here and you'll click on this icon, and then you'll just paste your secret key inside of here and click the apply and close. Oh, and there's another question about GPT and what version we support. It's GPT 3.5 Turbo. So that answered that question as well. But yeah, once you have that OpenAI secret key, just paste it in here, apply and close, and now StudioAssist is already installed in the base of Katalon Studio. Again, I'm working on 9.3, so if you're on a later version, I would highly recommend you to update to the latest version. so that you'll have access to the same capabilities that I did when I made the recording. Let's go through the questions. Oh, okay. Documentation I showed you before, but I'll just point it out. I will point it out again. Documentation website is through docs.katalon.com. When you're on here, you will then be able to go through all of our documentation. And for instance, if you have a question like the enhanced click one, you can easily type it into the search bar and you'll be able to see all of the capabilities that you're wanting to utilize. StudioAssist generate code in Groovy. Yes. StudioAssist does generate code in Groovy. There are times where you can actually start putting conditionals down. In fact, if we go to our advanced example of it, we can see inside the sample project. Let's go a bit further. Right, so if we go into our script, there is some more advanced utilization of this, right? So here we have the ability of generating a CVS file with 3 columns, etc., and start actually making some file input and output operations, right? This obviously falls outside of the scope of just Katalon, quote unquote, Katalon test steps, but actually goes into the actual code itself. Any other questions? So, how to switch to BDD sample frameworks from an already created project. As of right now, that's out of scope. That is something for a conversation with a solution engineer. To do that and to go through that step-by-step process will take a little bit longer than we have allotted for this Q&A session. Any others? Did I miss one? Let's go back a little bit. Looks like someone was asking for a question. We'll get onto that a little bit later on. You probably saw a prompt just now about a poll. We do highly recommend you guys to address this, answer this as honest as possible. Again, there are some hiccups that we saw in this presentation. Those will be addressed, of course, and future updates and future webinars in this series will continue and improve with your feedback. A couple of things to note is that the next webinar will be next month, and that we'll be talking about the next part of our platform. That would be the scheduling, the execution, the analytics side of things. And we can go into how we answer some major questions that you may have for your automation needs, which is how well can we scale? How do we scale? What if we don't have the infrastructure needed already? Or how can we do this in a cost-effective manner? All of these questions will be addressed and also more in our next section going into Katalon Studios. Great. I'm seeing a lot of good responses. Again, always greatly appreciated, the feedback. And it looks like all the questions have been answered. If you have any others with files using Excel download from the read from a PDF and Excel sheet. Okay. So there's a question that somebody was asking. It's like, can we do a webinar on how to do essentially parameterization and reading from files? Yes. Specifically, we could. Not next month, but future ones coming up. since we already have next month already scheduled out. There is a way for us to actually utilize something called PDF keywords. It's an extension that you'll have to install, but it will go through a PDF file, go and verify information out of it. Is there any requirement for the test steps to generate test code? Yeah, if you can clarify that a little bit more. So the requirement, I think you're referencing StudioAssist, right? If you're wondering the requirements for it, you only need to you need to type out what you want. So you can say click the button, right? But you'll need to point to an object in your object repository that would be point to this button using this ID, right? So that ID is going to be the folder structure inside your object repository. So inside here, I can say point to page underscore current appointment, and then point to the button underscore book appointment. In fact, since we're already in the StudioAssist example, I can just show you what that looks like. So inside here, right, I have a list of objects, and if I want to reference an object by in the object repository, I simply just say, in this object, there is a make appointment button. That make appointment button object exists at this location. So again, in the page Cura homepage, in this case, not the appointment, so we'll go down to this folder, and then the button underscore make appointment. So that is the way that we want to address. And again, for those who are wondering, is this the way it's always going to be? No, as anyone who has been a longtime customer of Katalon will say, is that within the past 2 years alone, we have grown, evolved, and changed many different things for the betterment of our end users and people as a whole to improve your guys' automation needs. So look forward to future updates on StudioAssist as we expand on it in future updates. Okay. Let's do one last check on questions. Can StudioAssist help generate test objects since recording doesn't work well with dynamic DOM? Okay, so yes. Well, first, let me answer this first part. Can StudioAssist help generate test objects? As of now, no. It is going to utilize the test object you have in the object repository. If you want to not do the record and playback, there are a number of things, right, that can be addressed. The record and playback for certain UI objects, and this is just automation as a whole, right? There will be problems in identification that the recorder won't naturally pick up. Again, that's just how automation is with all solutions. No solution can perfectly identify every object all the time. So how do we actually triage that? Well, the way we can go about this is how we identify the actual objects themselves, right? So if we were able to capture it during the recording session, I won't open up another recording session, but I can essentially just open up here. Let's go. I'll just go to a different test case that had a recording session on it. Repository, my Ninja. Okay, there we go. So if you are going through the record and playback features and you're saying that the object wasn't properly identified, there are a number of things that you can do. First, on execution, self-healing could find a solution to that problem, right? If it does, great. You simply need to go into the self-healing insight, accept the changes, and then the new identification will be working. However, if you want to do a more manual approach and or if smart healing was not able to pick up on that change, you do have a number of options to choose from.
So in the XPath, you have a list of not just one, but many other backup object XPath to utilize. This again will be utilized inside of Smart Healing. But if you're wanting to create your own, or if you're wanting to utilize these, all you need to do is just copy this and paste it inside of the actual selected locator. Let's say, for instance, however, though, the UI object that is having problems being picked up on is dynamic in location, right? Say screen size is different on different execution environments, or let's say that, sometimes based on, you know, a number of factors, the UI element is just in a different position. In some situation, that can be the case. We do recommend to switch over into attributes, right? Attributes are another way for us to identify an object based on what we have been able to capture. And the list of object attributes that we capture for the attribute for the object is pretty generic, right? We get the tags, the class, the tags, the XPath, etc. If there is a custom third-party tags like some of your developers have made, I have worked with customers before that utilize a automation tag, which is simply just a random number generator of like 9 digits. And that is a third-party tab that they can easily just add inside here. And then the Katalon Studio can easily pick up on that. That's a collaboration discussion you're going to need to have with your dev team and QA team together to instill that best of practices. But it's something that can help, that can work, as well as showcase how we can easily implement some other attributes that is not naturally captured in the record and playback or in the object spy. There is another thing that we just recently added is Smart Locator, right? This is going to be a little bit more time to explain, but essentially it's just another way for us to incorporate intelligent identification into our actual object repositories, so that we can actually start maintaining them, and again, in a new, improved, and more efficient manner. Hopefully that answered your question. And it seems like we do have a couple more. How to identify whether the functionality will be automated by record and playback for the most. Okay, so there is a way to do this during recording. So I am going to go into a recording session. I don't believe I need to go into this. So first things first, right? If you go into the record and playback, I always recommend to go into the expand view, right? The expand view does showcase a number of them. Let's just record a single object so we can showcase this. All right, so I'm going to click on my account. Okay, my account is done. Now, what I want to do is I want to show the captured object. It's in the top right, and it'll show you an expounded version. This part will showcase you the same thing that we saw inside of Katalon Studios after recording, except we can do it during. We do have something in here where we have the verify and highlight option, right? So if I were to click on this, you can see inside the application, it's blinking red, showcasing that this is the object that we are identifying on execution. So we do have that capability. You probably just didn't have the show captured object selected, and this is where it is. Again, you have the same maintenance, same ability. So if you don't like how we instinctively captured it for the XPath, right, we can easily just copy and paste it, put it into the selected locator, and verify and highlight to make sure it works. This is really great for those dynamic objects that have, dynamic location, but also dynamic attributes as well. Things like user IDs that can throw things off, or if a user profile login button has a different username, right? Those things can throw a wrench into identification that we can easily address and make sure that we prevent those from happening by simply going in and verifying and highlighting the objects that we, kind of have suspicion on. Okay. Let's see. Any questions? I think we got them all. Okay.
I do want to say thank you guys so much for joining us today. Again, we are going to be continuing this webinar series into next month, where we will take the assets that we have made, focus on execution, focus on environments, scaling our execution, scheduling them out, and going on past there. We may, again, based on time availability, we may be able to um, uh, squeeze in the actual CI/CD conversation into there as well. So if you ever wondered how to implement it or how to modify certain YAML files, we can start going through that as well. All right. Again, thank you so much, and we'll call this webinar done for today. Have a great day, guys.